Ukraine's campaign to defend itself against Russia has been defined by impressive technological innovation. Every idea that Russia comes up with seems to be countered by an ingenious solution. But sometimes even Ukraine can surprise us with the sheer bizarreness of its collective genius. Something shockingly simple is plunging Russia back to the Stone Age, as Putin's forces have been brought to their knees by a true game-changer in the Ukraine war. Graphite holds the key. We'll explain why this simple mineral has become so important later, but first, there's what Ukraine has been doing with graphite that has gotten Russia's forces so up in arms. In a war-torn region of Donetsk, Russia's forces are trying to break through. They're battering themselves against the Donetsk fortress belt of cities, and they're coming off a distant second. In March alone, Russia lost over 35,000 of its soldiers, many of them in Donetsk, all because Putin won't give up on his insane need to take this lethal piece of territory. The only thing that Russia has been able to rely on is power. Electricity is everything in modern warfare. Radars, air defenses, and entire command centers run on electricity, and Russia has managed to take over the power stations in the occupied territories to ensure that its soldiers always have the power they need. But now, something has changed. The reports are scattered. Ukraine hasn't announced that it's unleashing a brand new weapon against Russia. It's keeping quiet, allowing Russia's forces to discover the impact this weapon has firsthand without giving them any warning of what's coming. However, we're starting to hear about it from Putin's patsies on the ground. Ukraine is dropping bombs on Donetsk, only these bombs don't explode in a fiery fury that swallows up soldiers and destroys targets. They release something else into the skies, a substance that takes away power from Russia's soldiers, plunging them into darkness in the rear as soldiers fail on the front. Ukraine has graphite bombs, and Russia is mad about it. Earlier in April, Defense Express reported that Russia's forces in occupied Donetsk are now claiming that Ukraine has been unleashing graphite bombs in the occupied territories during terrifying nighttime raids. You don't need us to tell you that the night is the perfect time to cut power with these types of bombs. When the lights go out, Russian soldiers panic. These claims haven't been concocted out of thin air either. Scared soldiers are sharing footage of what they say Ukraine has started using. In one clip, which has been making the rounds on X, we see Russian air defenses tackling an incoming drone swarm. The Russians actually scored some hits, but the problem is revealed later in the video when the debris from the Ukrainian drones is examined. We see what appear to be graphite filaments. And those filaments are being released even when Ukraine's drones explode in the sky. Even official Russian sources are starting to circulate the claims that Ukraine is unleashing graphite bombs onto the occupied territories. TASS, which is one of Russia's leading news agencies, wrote on April 6th that Ukraine had deployed graphite bombs against power facilities in occupied Donetsk the day before. These bombs are detonating in mid-air and dispersing fine graphite threads, the outlet claims. In a report that is likely linked to the footage we mentioned earlier, TASS explains that Russia's air defense systems supposedly shot down 6 of Ukraine's drones and intercepted 10 more. But 3 got through and they dropped their payloads on power facilities. Take the reports of interceptions with a grain of salt. This is a Russian news agency after all. Still, TASS gives us a little insight into how Ukraine's new bombs work. More speculation comes from Defense Express. It notes that graphite bombs as a concept aren't new. Stick with us as we'll dive deeper into that soon. Ukraine's innovation seems to come from how it's delivering its graphite to Russia's defenses. A traditional graphite bomb is usually a cluster munition that contains several dozen sub-munitions. Each of those sub-munitions is filled with graphite filaments, which are dispersed over a wide area when the bomb goes off, and the sub-munitions are dispersed. Simple. A bomb is launched from an aerial platform, it explodes, and graphite rains down. Ukraine's challenge is that it doesn't want to risk its limited number of fighter jets and bombers to launch traditional graphite bombs into the occupied territories. So it's come up with a novel way to shove graphite into the Russian rear. Ukraine is sending in mid-range drones, most likely the FP-1 or FP-2 models, which are loaded with conventional warheads that are filled with graphite filaments. While this means the spread isn't as large as it would be with a cluster bomb, Defense Express notes, it also means that the risk is reduced. If the explosion of a warhead is what leads to the graphite falling from the sky, then Russia isn't even safe if its air defenses are working. Ukraine's drones may not hit their targets, but their graphite will still fall and could cause more issues in unexpected places. As we've so often seen from Ukraine, this is an innovative twist on a concept that already existed. Russia has no real answer for it. What Ukraine has created here is a cheat code that could be a game changer in the battle for Donetsk, a weapon that can cut power on Russia's forces with an ingenious little twist that shows how Ukraine is fighting, with one eye turned toward a future where it has booted Putin's soldiers out of Ukraine forever. Ukraine isn't publicizing any of this. It's letting its new bombs do all of the talking. What we see here is a brilliant use of a simple mineral that is sending Putin's troops back to the Stone Age. But why graphite bombs and not explosives? It's all about power and how Ukraine wants to snatch it out of Russia's hands while ensuring a future for Ukraine. To understand how, we need to take a quick peek at how a graphite bomb works. These bombs aren't designed to do what you would expect a bomb to do. They aren't destroying runways or shattering hardened targets. Loaded into a graphite bomb are thousands upon thousands of microscopic strands of the material that gives the bomb its name. Each of these strands is almost impossible to see on its own, but will descend like a fine dust on a target. Now here's the problem for Russia. Graphite is a conductive material. When the tiny fibers released by a graphite bomb drift down onto anything that produces or requires electricity, that conductivity becomes very important. Short circuits become a problem. Flowing electricity is attracted to the graphite fibers, which cause problems with overheating. Fail-safes kick in. Entire systems go offline because the graphite acts like a switch that has just been flipped to cut the power. One fiber isn't enough to do all of this, but when you have thousands all falling onto the same target, those fibers get vaporized en masse by electrical currents, creating ionized channels through which even more current flows. A cascading effect starts, and there's nothing that Russia can do to stop it before the power goes out in whatever Ukraine targeted. What Ukraine has on its hands are blackout bombs that it is able to unleash on the occupied territories using the same types of drones that are also delivering explosive warheads into Donetsk. If Defense Express is right, the FP-1 and FP-2 drones that Ukraine is producing have become more threatening than ever before. And if Russia wants to get an idea of just how effective Ukraine's graphite bombs can be, it only needs to look to the past. We told you earlier that the graphite bomb isn't a new concept. The US and NATO have used them before. During the Gulf War in the early 1990s, the US Navy had a warhead that it deployed via its Tomahawk cruise missiles into Iraq. Those missiles worked a little differently from the graphite bombs Ukraine is reportedly using today. Rather than dropping microscopic graphite fibers, they unwound reels of carbon fiber to short-circuit electronic equipment in Iraq. Almost a decade later, NATO was using a version of the graphite bomb against the former Yugoslavia. In Belgrade, which is now the capital city of Serbia, NATO started dropping what the media dubbed soft bombs. These were graphite bombs, much like what Ukraine is now using, and they caused the first major blackout that affected the civilians of Belgrade during the NATO war with Yugoslavia. Fast forward to now, and it's not just Ukraine that is unleashing graphite bombs on an enemy. Ukraine may have been inspired by reports that the US and Israel have been doing the same thing to deal with targets in Iran. In an April 1st report, Defense Express revealed that reports have been circulating that Israel has been using graphite bombs to target power plants in the Iranian capital city of Tehran. As with the reports of Ukraine's graphite bombs, none of this has been confirmed by the nation that is supposedly using the weapon. The graphite speaks for itself every time the power goes down in Iran, and there isn't an explosion that explains the problem. Ukraine is following the pattern that all those who've used graphite bombs before have followed. They're not publicizing it. Ukraine wants to leave Russia guessing about whether the latest drones that it sends into the occupied territories carry graphite or explosives. As for Russia, it can't do anything to protect itself against what Ukraine has sent. Even successful shots by air defenses just spread graphite around. And where will those air defenses be? In locations that Russia deems important. Which means there will always be more electrical equipment that could get hit, even if Ukraine's graphite bombs don't strike their intended targets. But there's a second layer of brilliance to Ukraine's new weapons. Graphite bombs aren't just about turning the lights out for Russia's forces. They're being used for a very specific reason. That changes everything, and by the way, you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to hit that button so you can keep up with our latest videos. So on the surface level, Ukraine's graphite bombs are about cutting the power in the Russian rear. But look beyond that and you see the true genius in what Ukraine is doing. Think back to all the other examples of graphite bomb usage that we've mentioned. In all of those cases, the bombs are used by one country on the territory of another nation. Ukraine's situation is different. It's using graphite bombs on its own occupied territory against power facilities that Ukraine built years ago. Therein lies the brilliance of Ukraine's strategy. Ukraine doesn't want Russia to benefit from Ukrainian power infrastructure. However, it also doesn't want to bomb that infrastructure into the ground, because that means more money has to be spent rebuilding that infrastructure when Ukraine has finally pushed Russia out of its territory. That's where graphite bombs become the perfect weapon. Ukraine can use these bombs to cut the power without causing any long-term massive damage to the power facilities that Ukraine itself built in Donetsk. Russia still has to carry out repairs. Tripped systems take time to bring online, and graphite could burn out small components that are needed to keep electrical systems running. But the power plants remain standing. That's not something that Ukraine has been able to guarantee before. It was only in November 2025 that Reuters reported on Ukrainian drones crashing into power plants in Donetsk, causing massive amounts of damage. Now those power plants can be shut down without the explosions. Ukraine is fighting with the future in mind, and on a symbolic level, that will crush Russia. Putin has made it very clear that he believes Ukraine shouldn't exist. Ukraine has never been a sovereign nation in the Russian president's eyes. It was once a part of Russia. It has always been a part of Russia, even after achieving sovereign status. And if Putin has his way, Ukraine will be forced to become part of Russia once more. So to see Ukraine not only fighting so hard for every scrap of its territory, but also using weapons that preserve infrastructure that Russia has taken over, is terrible for Putin. It tells him that Ukraine's spirit hasn't been broken, and the nation is looking toward a future where Russia will no longer be a problem that it has to deal with. Beyond the symbolic lies the strategic. And this is how Ukraine's use of graphite bombs can fit into the country's strategy beyond cutting the power for Russian soldiers in the rear. Let's talk air defenses. Something that we didn't mention about NATO's use of soft bombs in Serbia was just how effective they were. A report in The Guardian from May 1999 revealed that NATO managed to instantly cut off power for 70% of Serbia, taking with it the many military computers, communication systems, and radars that had been set up to help Yugoslavia defend itself against NATO's intervention. In particular, NATO's soft bombs were able to take Serbian air defenses offline. Those defenses had been causing major problems. They had even managed to shoot down a US Air Force pilot flying an F-117 Nighthawk fighter jet, which was a capability that NATO likely didn't believe existed in Belgrade at the time. Taking out Belgrade's air defenses was huge for NATO in the late 1990s. The same applies to Ukraine and the air defenses that Russia has amassed in the occupied territories today. Ukraine has been ripping through Russian air defenses in the last year or so. According to the Kyiv Independent, the period between June 2025 and March 26 saw Ukraine carry out 492 strikes against Russian air defense infrastructure, with hundreds more targeting anti-access area denial assets that Russia has set up in places like Donetsk. Now add Ukraine's drone-based graphite bombs to this campaign against Russian air defenses. Ukraine gives itself the chance to create safe aerial corridors without sacrificing its explosive drones to do so. It's a simple concept. The graphite bombs cripple radars and mess with the circuitry of the air defense systems. While Russia is trying to repair those systems, drones carrying explosive warheads and even Ukraine's missiles can be sent out to take more valuable targets. By the time the air defenses are back online, Russia is dealing with craters in the ground, and it goes even deeper than that. Far behind the front lines, Russia will have set up command and control or C2 centers in the occupied territories. C2 is everything in warfare. Without it, even the most basic functions of a military are severely hampered. It's in C2 centers that planning is done, and through which the coordination and execution of those plans is managed. In Ukraine, that means C2 is all about organizing Russia's troops on the ground so they can carry out their endless assaults against Ukraine's defenses. We can debate all day about how effective Russia's C2 is. The 35,000 deaths for March that we mentioned earlier suggests not very. But the fact remains that these centers exist, and much like everything else, they need electricity. C2 centers are loaded with communications equipment. They have monitors that deliver information about battlefield conditions. All of this is stuff that a graphite bomb can take out of commission, even if only temporarily. What Ukraine now has is a weapon that it can use to cause chaos behind the front lines that essentially creates a domino effect. C2 gets crippled in the back. Instructions don't get sent to commanders on the front. Russian infiltrators in the grey zones get isolated, cut off, and then die. Basically, if it's electrical, then it's a target. And almost everything that Russia has in the rear needs electricity. Ukraine cutting the power will force Russia to rely on old and far slower methods to communicate. Pen and paper will become the norm wherever Ukraine attacks. If Putin wants to use outdated attritional strategies that harm his military more than Ukraine's army, graphite bombs allow Ukraine to twist the knife and send Russia's soldiers back to an era where electronic communication didn't exist. Oh, and there's one more thing. Earlier we told you that Defense Express believes that Ukraine is loading its FP-1 and FP-2 drones with graphite. Now imagine Ukraine doing the same, only it packs graphite into a long-range drone such as the FP-5 Flamingo. That drone has a range of around 3,000 kilometers or 1,860 miles, which means it can strike almost anywhere of strategic importance inside Russia. What if Flamingos start flying to Russian power stations? Graphite could fall all over the motherland, knocking out industrial facilities, chemical plants, and civilian power infrastructure. None of the damage would be permanent, it wouldn't need to be. Graphite could serve as the new way for Ukraine to constantly remind Putin's people that their leader started a war that can be brought right back to their doorstep. We wonder how many mass blackouts in Moscow and St. Petersburg will be tolerated by Russia's elite before they have something to say about the graphite raining down on Russia. One thing is for certain. If Ukraine wants to go all in on graphite bombs, it'll have no problem getting its hands on the most important material used in those bombs. Ukraine is home to a lot of graphite. So much that the New Voice of Ukraine points out that Ukraine was the fourth largest producer of graphite between 2022 and 24, even though Russia's invasion had forced temporary shutdowns of Ukraine's main graphite mine. There are also an estimated 17.9 million tons of graphite reserves in Ukraine, the same outlet points out. Not all of that graphite will be accessible, of course. Some is in the occupied territories and not all reserves are accessible, but still, Ukraine has graphite. A lot of it. What Russia is reporting in Donetsk may just be a test run for a much larger campaign, an operation that could engulf not just the occupied territories, but some of the regions of Russia that Putin has managed to protect against Ukraine's attacks. The cheat code has been unlocked. The graphite storm may be coming. Russia and its military could be brought to its knees by a weapon that is dangerous even when it's blown out of the sky. Speaking about cheat codes, Russia thinks that Ukraine has been cheating with its most recent long-range strikes on Russian territory. Refineries burn, critical oil infrastructure is shattered, and Russia's air defenses are failing. How is Ukraine pulling all of this off? Check out our video to discover the answer. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the latest weapons that Ukraine deploys against Putin's forces in the occupied territories. And thank you for watching.